I smelled citrus cleaner and someone else's perfume before I turned the corner to my own kitchen. The morning sun pooled over the marble island like liquid honey, and there she was, bare legs crossed on my stool, my silk robe tied neatly, sipping coffee from my favorite mug, the one that says, "World's okayest lawyer." She smiled as if we were meeting for brunch. "Hi," she said, casual, polite. "I didn't realize you'd be home so early." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Neither did I. I'd cut short a zoning meeting because the developer I was representing, my husband, had failed to send over updated drawings, and the city clerk refused to sit through another round of speculation. I thought I'd come home, pour coffee, and schedule the calls myself. Instead, I got this: Amanda Hale. I recognized her instantly from Richard's social feeds, the protégé, the up-and-coming interior designer he'd taken under his wing, the wing currently wearing my robe and drinking my coffee. She shifted, clearly debating whether to stand or stay perched like a smug parrot. She stayed. Brave girl. I placed my briefcase precisely where I always did, edge-aligned with the grout line, and smiled. "Hope the coffee's still hot. That blend takes forever to brew." "Oh, it's perfect," she said, tone light, voice barely higher than the sound of the percolator still humming. A moment later, Richard strolled in. Sport jacket, open collar, the air of a man rehearsing sincerity. He froze for just a fraction before recovering into a grin. "Eleanor," he said warmly, "you're home early." "Apparently," I said, "though it seems I've walked into something of a hosted event." He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Let's not make this dramatic. Amanda's been helping with the interior concepts for the new model homes. She stayed over so we could start early." I raised an eyebrow. "And you found my robe part of the creative process?" Amanda flushed slightly but didn't apologize. "I spilled something on my shirt last night. Richard said I could borrow it." How generous of him. I nodded, crossing to the counter, setting my keys beside her phone. "Interesting. You know, Amanda, this house was one of Richard's first big builds. Every fixture, every hinge, every piece of marble. We fought about all of it. I wanted understated, he wanted impressive. Seems he's gotten what he wanted." Richard's jaw tightened. "Eleanor, let's not—" I held up a hand. "Relax, I'm just making conversation." He exhaled, voice smooth again. "Listen, Ellie. That name, the one he used only when he needed me pliable. Don't." He ignored the warning. "I think it's time we're honest about things. I've been unhappy for a long time, and Amanda understands me in ways you never really tried to. I don't want to fight. You can stay here if you want, but you need to accept what this is now. Or you can leave. Your choice. But if you walk away, you leave with nothing." Nothing. Such an interesting word. I smiled, faintly enough to pass for fragile. "If that's what you want." "Good," he said, relieved. "We can handle this like adults." Amanda sipped again, studying me as though I were a lecture she'd already heard. I walked past them both, out to the foyer, grabbed my bag, and slipped on my heels. "I'll be out of your way," I said. "Enjoy your new arrangement." And then I left. No door slam, no tears, just a small smile that reached exactly nowhere. Outside, the air was crisp, the kind that makes you aware of every breath. Lydia's silver SUV sat at the curb, engine idling. She rolled down the window. "So," she said, lips pursed like a lemon rind, "you found out." "Good morning to you too, Lydia." "You can't blame him, you know," she went on. "You've been all contracts and court filings for years. Men need attention." "Is that your professional opinion as the neighborhood gossip chair?" Her smirk faltered. "You could try to be gracious about this." "Oh, I plan to be," I said pleasantly. "Graciousness is my specialty." She blinked, uncertain whether I was serious. I gave her my calmest smile and walked away. Driving felt automatic. Turn signal, lane change, the hum of tires on asphalt. The world continued politely oblivious. Willow Bend, with its perfect lawns and trimmed hedges, looked like an advertisement for composure. The residents believed in order, good fences, and tasteful silence, perfect for secrets. I pulled into my office parking lot and sat for a moment, letting the quiet settle. 15 years of marriage condensed into one absurd tableau. My robe, my coffee, my husband's smug grin. I'd drafted every contract for his developments, negotiated every investor term, balanced the ledgers while he basked in attention. All those signatures, initials, notarized seals, tiny bricks in a fortress he thought he owned. It took me a minute to start laughing, not the kind that breaks, the kind that clarifies, because nothing about our empire was in his name. When Richard started his first luxury project, I'd set up a trust for tax efficiency. Over the years, everything, properties, vehicles, even the brokerage accounts, ended up routed through that trust. And who was the trustee? Eleanor Brooks, real estate attorney. I wasn't cruel. I never planned to use it against him. But then again, I never planned to come home to an interior designer in my robe. I called the bank. "This is Eleanor Brooks," I said when the line connected. "Please note that Richard Brooks is no longer authorized on any joint access points. Use Control Memo Alpha 7. The manager hesitated for a heartbeat. "Of course, Mrs. Brooks. Effective immediately." "Yes, and please send confirmation to my secure email." I ended the call, checked the time, 9:42 a.m., and wrote a note in my planner. Step 1, access revoked. There was something soothing about handwriting in ink, permanent and deliberate. Next, I called my assistant, Kira. "Can you bring me the vehicle files?" She arrived 10 minutes later, clutching a binder thicker than a toddler. "Everything through last quarter," she said. "Are we retitling again?" "Eventually," I said. "Let's start with the ones under Brooks Development." While she flipped pages, I opened my email and drafted a short message to our insurance contact. "Please prepare updated certificates removing Richard Brooks as primary driver and signatory. Use prior power of attorney for reference." Kira glanced up. "You okay?" "Never better," I said. "Just cleaning house." That afternoon, I stopped at the Willow Bend Cafe, the kind of place where everyone pretended to work remotely while eavesdropping. Claire and Jennifer were there, of course. They spotted me instantly, eyes widening with the predatory curiosity of women who thrived on second-hand drama. "Eleanor," Claire called, too bright. "We were just talking about the new design preview Richard's planning. You must be thrilled." "Oh, ecstatic," I said, sliding into the booth opposite them. "Though I think Amanda deserves most of the credit." Jennifer's straw froze midair. "Amanda," I smiled. "You know, the designer. She's got such initiative." Their silence was syrup thick. I almost felt generous. Almost. Claire leaned in. "You're taking this really well." "Shouldn't I?" I said lightly. "Richard's always encouraged mentorship. He just forgot to clarify boundaries." Jennifer's phone buzzed. She glanced down, eyes flickering. "Oh, wow," she murmured. "She just posted something. A story. Looks like your kitchen." I sipped my tea. Of course she did. By evening, the story had circulated through Willow Bend faster than a discount sale. The caption, "Designing New Beginnings." I almost admired her nerve. Almost. At home, I didn't bother going inside. I parked at the curb and watched from the street. Lights glowed through the windows, warm, inviting. Richard's silhouette crossed the living room. Amanda followed, a glass of wine in hand. They looked like a stock photo for poor judgment. I turned off the engine and sat still, long enough to hear the crickets start their chorus. Then, I pulled my briefcase onto my lap and opened the inner pocket. Inside was a thin envelope labeled in my handwriting, "If he ever gets cute." It contained 3 documents, a list of account numbers, a pre-signed vehicle transfer order, and a trust amendment drafted years ago, but never filed. I'd written it half in jest after one of Richard's networking dinners ran too late. Apparently, I'd had better instincts than I realized. I read the date at the top, 7 years ago. It would hold. "Cute," I murmured. "Let's see how cute you can get." The next morning, I wore jeans and a grey sweater instead of my usual suit. Kira raised an eyebrow. "Casual Friday?" "Casual Thursday," I corrected. "And yes, new policy." I spent the morning signing letters, each one polite, professional, irrevocable. It's remarkable how civilized revenge looks on legal letterhead. At noon, Lydia appeared at my office uninvited. She bypassed Kira with a glare sharp enough to cut paper and barged in. "We need to talk." "Do we?" I said without looking up from my papers. "I know you're angry, but ruining Richard won't make you happy." "Who said anything about ruining him? I'm simply following procedure." She folded her arms. "He loves her, Eleanor. You need to move on gracefully. Don't embarrass yourself." I smiled sweetly. "I wouldn't dream of it. I'm much too busy." Lydia frowned, uncertain, then tried a different tack. "People are talking. They say you've frozen the accounts." "People say many things. You'd know." Her cheeks flushed. "If you push this, you'll end up alone." "I'm already there," I said quietly, "and it's peaceful." She huffed, spun on her heel, and stormed out. Kira poked her head in. "Should I have stopped her?" "No," I said. "She's excellent background noise." That evening, I drove to the bank to deliver originals. The manager, a precise man named Victor, greeted me with the kind of politeness reserved for wealthy clients who could destroy reputations. "All set," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Authorization transfers complete. Mr. Brooks no longer has access. Notifications will go out tomorrow." "Perfect," I said, signing where indicated. On my way out, I noticed Richard's car parked near the entrance. Of course, subtlety was never his strength. I walked past him as he climbed out. "Eleanor, what are you doing?" he demanded. "Just business," I said. "Yours mostly." "You're overreacting." "To what? Your mentorship program?" He ran a hand through his hair. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "I think I'm making it exactly as hard as it needs to be." He grabbed my arm, not harshly, but firmly. "Let's talk somewhere private." I looked at his hand until he released me. "Tomorrow," I said. "At home, if you can get inside." His confusion was almost artful. Driving away, I laughed again, the kind of laugh that sounds like someone remembering a joke halfway through. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Friday morning, the neighborhood group chat exploded with messages. "Anyone else hear sirens near the Brooks house?" "Security alarm malfunction?" "Someone said the system locked the owners out." I didn't respond. I just scrolled and sipped my coffee, the same blend Amanda had enjoyed, and smiled. Richard called 6 times before noon. I answered on the 7th. "What did you do?" he shouted. "Nothing you didn't authorize," I said calmly. "Remember all those papers you signed? They work beautifully." "This isn't funny, Eleanor. I can't access the house, the cars." "Then perhaps you should call your interior designer. She seems resourceful." "You're going to regret this." "Doubtful," I said, and hung up. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the sun on my face through the blinds. Somewhere across town, Richard was realizing that every brag, every swaggering "my company" statement had been technically untrue. The empire was, and always had been, mine. Outside my office window, the manicured lawns of Willow Bend gleamed in the afternoon light, deceptively calm. Behind those trimmed hedges, people were already whispering, rewriting the story to fit their taste for scandal. They'd say Eleanor Brooks finally snapped, or that she'd plotted this for years. They'd be half right either way. At 5, I packed my things. On my desk, the planner lay open to a neat list. Step 1, access revoked. Step 2, vehicles reassigned. Step 3, Notify investors. I tapped the pen once against the margin, then added, Step 4, test alarm. I closed the book, slipped it into my bag, and walked out, the faintest smile on my lips. Revenge, I was learning, didn't need noise. It just needed paperwork and patience. And I'd always been excellent at both. By the time the sun lifted over Willow Bend the next morning, the neighborhood had already found a new topic: me. I could feel it before I even left my driveway. Curtains fluttered just enough to show someone's outline, and Mrs. Haskins across the street suddenly discovered an urgent need to water her hydrangeas at 6:45 in the morning. People in this town don't need newspapers. They need binoculars and boredom. I dressed in navy slacks and a crisp white blouse, simple but structured. My hair went into a low twist, efficient, sharp, untouchable. The sort of look that said I could both sell your house and repossess it before lunch. At the office, Kira was already waiting, coffee in one hand, folder in the other. You're early, she said. So are you. She gave me a small grin, words traveling fast. It always does, I said, taking the folder. Let's make sure they have something interesting to talk about. Inside were my pre-arranged control documents, the quiet levers I'd designed years ago. I opened the binder and began signing. Each signature felt less like paperwork and more like precision surgery. Clean, controlled, necessary. First call, the bank. Victor, ever composed, picked up instantly. Mrs. Brooks. Morning, Victor. Confirming all access points have been updated. Yes, ma'am. Accounts ending in 26 and 41 now require your authorization only. Mr. Brooks attempted access last evening. The system flagged it as unauthorized. Of course he did. Perfect. Leave the flag in place. I want full audit logs by Monday. Understood. Thank you, Victor. Always a pleasure. I hung up and checked my planner. Step 2, vehicles. I called the insurance company next. This is Eleanor Brooks. Please remove Richard Brooks as a listed driver on policies 35 through 42. Coverage continues under the trust entities. No interruption. The agent confirmed, polite but puzzled. Will Mr. Brooks be notified? Eventually, I said, by circumstances. By mid-morning, I'd completed what most people would call the logistics of an empire. I called them Tuesday. Then came the HOA email chain. Lydia, predictably, had started it. From Lydia Brooks. Subject, maintaining community decorum, neighbors. Please remember that personal disputes should remain private. It reflects poorly on all of us when family matters become public spectacle. Discretion is our greatest asset. Bless her heart, trying to sound noble while stirring the pot. I replied once, politely. From Eleanor Brooks. Thank you for your concern, Lydia. I appreciate your commitment to community standards. You'll be pleased to know everything is under control. A single sentence that, in Willow Bend terms, might as well have been fireworks. By lunchtime, Claire called. Eleanor, you can't just shut him out like that. Can't I? I said between bites of salad. He says he can't get into the house, or the accounts, or... Then he must be having an off day, I said. Happens to everyone. She hesitated. He's staying with Amanda for now. Adorable, I said. Maybe she'll design him a conscience. Claire groaned softly. People are saying you're being harsh. They said I was cold before, I said. Consistency is comforting. After the call, I drove downtown to deliver documents to the title office. The receptionist blinked when she saw the stack. That's a lot of transfers, she said. Spring cleaning, I replied. By 3 o'clock, the first tow truck called to confirm. Ma'am, 2 vehicles scheduled for pickup tomorrow morning. 1 black Range Rover, 1 silver coupe, both registered under your LLC. Delivery to your storage facility. That's correct, I said. Be prompt. He's punctual when it inconveniences him. The man chuckled uncertainly. Yes, ma'am. When I hung up, my phone vibrated with another message from Richard. "We need to talk." Then another. "You can't just erase me from everything." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed one sentence. "You manage that part on your own." He didn't reply. That evening, I stopped at the community centre for the HOA's spring beautification meeting. Lydia was at the front table, clipboard in hand, wearing her power scarf, the kind of floral pattern that tried too hard to look friendly. As soon as I entered, whispers rippled. I offered a polite smile and took the only empty chair near the back. Lydia cleared her throat dramatically. "Before we start, I want to remind everyone that our neighborhood thrives on unity." "Unity requires honesty," someone muttered. Lydia's eyes flicked toward me. "And restraint." I folded my hands. "Two excellent qualities. Perhaps we'll practice both tonight." She ignored me, continuing with her agenda: mulch distribution, fence repainting, HOA dues. All background noise until she said, "Lastly, we've had concerns about disruptive events at one of our properties." A dozen heads turned my way. "Which property?" I asked innocently. "Yours," she said, tight-lipped. "Apparently, there were multiple alarm incidents last night, and law enforcement was notified." I smiled. "I imagine it's unsettling when things stop responding to the wrong codes." Her pen froze mid-note. "Excuse me." "I'm sure the system's just learning who belongs there," I said sweetly. "Smart homes take a little time to adjust." A few quiet laughs broke around the table. Lydia's expression tightened until it could have cracked porcelain. After the meeting, she cornered me in the parking lot. "You're humiliating yourself," she hissed. "Am I?" I said. "Because from where I'm standing, you seem far more flustered than I am." "You've always thought you were better than us." "No, Lydia," I said, stepping closer. "I've always thought I was smarter than you. Turns out I was right." Her lips parted, but no words came. I patted her shoulder lightly. "See you around." Back in my car, I allowed myself one deep breath before starting the engine. The satisfaction wasn't loud. It was clean, almost quiet, like closing a well-balanced file drawer. That night, I made a new list in my planner. House alarm reprogrammed. Vehicle retrieval scheduled. Investor notice drafted. Underneath, I added, observe reactions. It didn't take long. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of texts. The first was from Jennifer. "Did you know Richard's car is gone? Tow truck at dawn." The second from Claire. "He's saying you stole it." I typed a reply. Correction, reclaimed it. By mid-morning, Richard was waiting outside my office building, pacing beside the curb like a man rehearsing outrage. I saw him through the glass doors and took my time finishing a call before stepping out. He waved his arms as I approached. "What do you think you're doing?" "Working," I said. "You've gone too far, Eleanor." "Define too far. I'm simply enforcing the ownership terms you signed." "I never signed away." "Yes, you did. Page 12, paragraph 4. You initialed in blue ink. I told you not to, but you insisted it looked friendlier." His face twitched. "You set me up." "No," I said. "You volunteered." He glanced around, aware of people watching through the windows. "Let's talk somewhere else." "Not today." "Eleanor, you told me to leave with nothing," I said evenly. "I'm just returning the courtesy." He opened his mouth, closed it again, then stalked off toward a rented sedan. It was beige. I watched him drive away and thought that somehow beige suited him. Later that afternoon, I met with a few of Richard's investors at a cafe downtown. They greeted me with cautious smiles, the kind people reserve for potential storms. "Mrs. Brooks," one of them began, "we're hearing conflicting reports. Is Richard still the controlling partner?" I stirred my tea. "He was never the controlling partner. I am." The man frowned. "But his name appears on promotional material. Marketing and ownership are not the same." They exchanged glances. "We'd appreciate documentation." "Of course," I said, sliding a folder across the table. You'll find all relevant signatures, clauses, and power transfers enclosed. I suggest you review page 15. They did. Their expressions changed in unison, like synchronized swimmers surfacing for air. One cleared his throat. Well, that clarifies matters. Good, I said. You'll continue operations as before. Payments route through my office from now on. They nodded, grateful to have clear authority. Business people hate uncertainty more than betrayal. When I left the cafe, the sky was turning pink over the rooftops. I drove past my house. The driveway was empty, the front door locked, alarm light blinking a calm green. Through the window, I could see Amanda pacing with her phone, gesturing wildly. Richard stood behind her, gesturing even more. I parked across the street and watched for a moment. The gate refused his code again. He hit the keypad harder, as if force would change logic. It didn't. Inside the car, I laughed quietly. There was something poetic about seeing a man try to argue with technology. When I finally drove away, I saw the neighbors' curtains shift. Someone would tell someone else before the hour ended, and by breakfast, the story would grow wings. Perfect. The next day brought the final confirmation: bank accounts secure, vehicles retitled, investment stabilized under my management. I walked into my office and found Kira holding a courier envelope. From the bank, she said, confirmation copies. I opened it, scanned the signatures, and exhaled slowly. Everything was officially, legally, and irrevocably mine. The phone rang. Victor again. Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Brooks called this morning. He requested reinstatement. I'm sure he did. He threatened to escalate. Then I suggest you remind him that escalation requires standing. He has none. Victor paused, amusement flickering in his voice. Understood. After the call, I stepped to the window. Outside, the street was bright, the day ordinary. Nothing looked different, yet everything was. At noon, Lydia appeared again, this time in person, storming into my office like she owned the building. Do you realize what you've done? Yes, I said, thoroughly. You've destroyed his reputation. Correction, he did that when he invited someone else into my kitchen. Her face reddened. He loves her. Then he'll have ample time to prove it, preferably from the sidewalk. You'll regret this, I smiled. I doubt it. Regret requires sympathy. She sputtered, then left in a huff, slamming the door. Kira poked her head in after she'd gone. That woman could generate electricity. Unfortunately, it would still be wasted energy, I said. As the day wound down, I signed the last of the investor notifications. My hands moved automatically, neat loops of ink marking the conclusion of years of quiet preparation. At 5:15, my phone buzzed with a text. Alarm test successful. Access restricted to authorized users only. I tapped back one word. Excellent. Outside, the world carried on. Dog walkers, joggers, sprinklers misting over sidewalks. The facade of tranquility that Willow Bend wore so well. But behind those painted shutters, every neighbor was already telling their version of my story, trying to decide whether I was villain or visionary. Maybe both. When I reached home that evening, I parked halfway down the block, watching from a distance. The tow truck arrived precisely on time. The driver hopped out, clipboard in hand, then hooked the sleek silver coupe to the winch. Amanda burst out the front door, shouting something I couldn't hear. She waved her arms, panicked, while Richard stumbled behind her, trying to call someone. Anyone. The driver never looked up. The car rose smoothly, tires leaving the driveway like an elevator lifting off. Amanda turned in a slow circle, helpless. Richard threw his phone, then kicked the mailbox. I stayed quiet, watching. The last rays of sunset caught the chrome bumper as the truck pulled away. When it was gone, I started my car and drove past slowly. Amanda caught my eye for a brief second. I smiled through the window, small, polite, the way you smile at a stranger who's about to learn something the hard way. Back at the house, the alarm light flickered once, acknowledging me, then steadied. Inside, the air smelled of lemon and peace. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of wine, and stood where Amanda had sat 2 mornings before. My robe hung neatly on its hook again. The mug, world's okayest lawyer, waited clean and dry beside the sink. I traced the letters with one finger and whispered, "Adequate seems underrated." The phone rang once. I ignored it. The second ring stopped midway, replaced by a chime from the alarm panel. Perimeter secured. Perfect. In the quiet that followed, I looked around my spotless kitchen, at the evening light catching the glass edges of the counters, and thought how calm power can look when it's done right. Tomorrow would bring noise, calls, rumors, perhaps a visit from Richard's lawyer. But tonight, there was only the steady rhythm of the clock and the certainty that, for the first time in years, every piece of my life was exactly where it belonged. I raised my glass toward the window, where the reflection of my own smile looked back. "To new arrangements," I said softly, and took a sip. The morning after the tow trucks came, Willow Bend hummed like a power line. Everyone walked their dogs twice just to pass my house. I made sure the curtain stayed open, let them see calm, coffee, toast, a woman who slept well. Scandal loses half its force when the subject looks rested. The first ring of trouble came from Richard's attorney. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm calling on behalf of my client." "I'm sure you are," I said, "but unless your client can show ownership, there's nothing to discuss." He hesitated. "Richard's position is that the trust was created for tax shelter purposes, not to deprive him of his assets. Kindly review Clause 6. He did. I heard paper shuffle, then a sigh. "You're meticulous." "I'm a real estate attorney. It's in the job description." When I hung up, Kira grinned from the doorway. "You sounded like you were ordering lunch." "Confidence," I said, "pairs well with understatement." By afternoon, the story reached the community chat feed. Someone uploaded a photo of Richard pacing in front of the locked gate. Someone else added, "Security glitch." Then Lydia chimed in, "Please respect privacy during this difficult time." Which, of course, meant keep talking. At 3 o'clock, my office window reflected a Range Rover idling across the street. Beige sedan yesterday, borrowed luxury today. He was adapting poorly. I packed my files slowly, slipped into my car, and let him follow me halfway to downtown before ducking into a supermarket loading lane. He overshot by half a block, confused, circling like a lost tourist. I parked behind a delivery van and waited until he gave up. No need for drama. Efficiency is quieter. That night, the first formal notice went out to his investors. The letter began, "Due to conduct variance, management control transfers to the trustee of record." I reread it twice. It sounded almost kind. The next morning, the storm landed. Richard showed up at the office, face flushed, Amanda in tow. The receptionist's eyes went wide. "Should I—" "Let them in," I said. He burst through the door. "What's the meaning of this? The projects are under review. The bank froze the lines." "They froze your lines," I said. "Mine remain functional." "You can't do this, Eleanor." "I already did." Amanda tried to interject. "We just want a civil conversation." I turned to her. "Then perhaps wear your own robe next time." Colour rose in her cheeks. That was a misunderstanding. "Of course, everything is until paperwork says otherwise." Richard slammed his palm on my desk. "You've made your point. Stop it before this gets ugly." "It's already ugly," I said softly. "Just not for me." He stared at me for a long moment, searching for the woman who used to smooth things over. She wasn't home. Amanda tugged his sleeve. "Let's go." He hesitated, then followed her out. When the door closed, Kira whispered, "I thought he might throw something." "He won't," I said. "He's afraid of fingerprints." The rest of the day ran on caffeine and signatures. Investors called, cautious but polite. One said, "We always preferred your emails anyway." Progress by courtesy. That evening, I stopped by the community centre again. A charity event, Lydia's domain, crystal punch bowls, paper flowers, tension disguised as politeness. She spotted me and marched over. "Do you enjoy humiliating the family?" "Immensely," I said, then smiled. "But tonight I'm just here for the silent auction." She lowered her voice. "You're destroying your reputation." "Funny," I said. "It seems to be thriving." People nearby pretended not to listen, while absolutely listening. Lydia's hand trembled on her glass. "You'll regret this, Eleanor." "You keep saying that," I replied, as if repetition makes it true. The next morning, the local paper ran a tiny real estate blurb. "Brooks Development under new management." 2 sentences long, perfectly factual. I cut it out and pinned it to my corkboard like a trophy. By noon, Victor from the bank called. "Small update," he said. "The joint account now shows only your signature authority. We've notified Mr. Brooks of the change." "Reactions?" "Loud," he said, "but unproductive." That afternoon I allowed myself a drive through the construction sites, Richard's once proud kingdom. Workers nodded politely, uncertain who to fear. I signed a few invoices, checked safety logs, made notes, order settling in where chaos once lived. On the way back, my phone buzzed. "Meet me." One last conversation. I almost ignored it. Then curiosity, that old professional weakness, won. I replied, 5 p.m., the old model house, 15 minutes. When I arrived, the house stood half-staged, candles unlit, scent diffusers puffing fake vanilla. Richard waited near the island, Amanda hovering behind. He looked worn, his charm fraying. "I didn't bring you here to fight," he said. "We can work something out." "There's nothing left to work out." "You'd really throw everything away?" "I'm keeping everything," I said. "That's the point." Amanda spoke softly. "Eleanor, you can't hold on to hate forever." "Hate?" I smiled. "You mistake efficiency for emotion." Richard's temper cracked. "You're proud of this? Making me a joke." "Not a joke," I said. "An example." He stepped closer. "What do you want from me?" "Silence," I said, "and distance." I turned to leave. He called after me. "You'll be alone." I looked back once. "So are you." Outside, the sky was fading to blue-gray. I drove to the office, sent one last email to Victor, authorization for investor redistribution, and shut my laptop. When I got home, the alarm recognized me instantly, doors sliding open with a soft chime. The house smelled of citrus cleaner again, but this time it was peace, not intrusion. I stood at the window, watching the quiet street. Somewhere behind the neat lawns and polite hedges, phones were buzzing, stories twisting. I let them. Truth, after all, was already written. In ink, in contracts, in every careful step I'd taken. Tomorrow I'd move to step 3, formal transfer of management. Tonight I allowed myself something better than victory. Control. The simple, steady rhythm of a life finally under my own name. The morning air tasted faintly of rain, and the sky had that pale hue that makes a neighborhood look more honest than it really is. Willow Bend was pretending to wake up. Sprinklers humming, garage doors yawning open, dogs pulling their sleepy owners down sidewalks. I watched from my window as the world straightened its collar, blissfully unaware that its favorite couple had turned into the week's cautionary tale. Richard hadn't called since our exchange at the model house. Amanda, however, had. 3 times. Each call began with hesitation and ended with a voicemail that started, "Mrs. Brooks, Eleanor, I think we should talk." I ignored all of them. When people think they've discovered guilt in you, silence makes them frantic. By mid-morning, Kira knocked on my door. "She's here," she whispered. "She?" "Amanda Hale. She said it's important." Of course she did. I told Kira to send her in. then arranged my papers neatly, habit more than necessity. When Amanda stepped inside, she was dressed with the kind of effort that only guilt produces. Pale blouse, dark skirt, makeup just enough to look regretful, but not theatrical. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, closing the door behind her. "You weren't on my schedule," I replied. I didn't know where else to go. Everything's falling apart." I studied her carefully. She was younger than I'd realized, sharp lines where confidence used to live. "You're referring to your living arrangements or your conscience?" "Both, maybe." She hesitated, wringing her hands. "Richard says you tricked him, that you planned this for years." "He's half right," I said. "I didn't plan for you. You were an unexpected bonus." She flinched. "I never meant to hurt you." "I'm sure that's true in the same way people mean to pay their credit cards on time. Intention is admirable. Execution matters more." Amanda glanced toward the window, as if searching for the exit. "I just want to fix things." "Then start by fixing your own life," I said. "You're not in mine anymore." I turned back to my papers, signaling the end of our conversation. She didn't move. "Please," she said quietly, "can we at least meet tonight? Somewhere private. I need to explain." I considered her. There was something fragile about her voice, a tremor that hinted at fear, though whether of Richard, me, or the gossip machine, I couldn't tell. "Fine," I said finally. 7 o'clock, model home, wear flats." Her eyes widened a little at that last part, but she nodded quickly. "Thank you." When she left, Kira leaned against the doorway. "You're really meeting her again." "I like symmetry," I said. "The scene deserves closure." By the time the clock struck 7, clouds had gathered over Willow Bend. The model home sat at the edge of the development like a half-finished promise. Lights glowed behind frosted glass, and faint music drifted from a wireless speaker someone had left on. Soft jazz, the kind that sells kitchens. Amanda was already inside, standing near the counter. "I didn't think you'd come." "I said I would," I replied. "I keep my agreements." She smiled faintly, nervous. "I guess I should start with an apology." "Start wherever you like." "I was stupid," she said. "He told me you two were over, that you'd grown distant, that he just needed time to make things official. And I believed him." "You believed what suited you," I said. "We all do." She nodded slowly. "He's been different lately. Angry. Blaming me for everything. He said you ruined him." I walked to the island, resting my palms on the cool stone. "Richard ruined Richard. I simply filed the paperwork." She let out a shaky laugh. "You're terrifying, you know that." "I've been called worse." We stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space. Then she said, "I want to make amends." I tilted my head. "Amends are fine. Consequences are better." She frowned. "What does that mean?" I stepped aside and gestured toward the garage door. "Come with me." She followed cautiously. The garage smelled of paint and air freshener. Her sleek convertible sat parked inside, a glossy silver showpiece. On its hood, drawn carefully in the layer of dust, were the words, "Borrowed style." Her mouth fell open. "What did you—" "Nothing permanent," I said. "Just a message. You're fond of messages, aren't you? Designing new beginnings." "Wasn't it?" Her face went pale. "You had no right." "Actually," I said, "I had every right. You used my home as your stage. Consider this creative balance." She took a step toward me, voice trembling. "You're insane." "Possibly," I said, "but I'm sane enough to know what belongs to me." The music from the speaker drifted into a slower tune, soft percussion underlining her silence. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the robe. She straightened. "You can't intimidate me." "I don't have to, you're doing that yourself." I walked to the workbench, picked up a set of folded papers, and handed them to her. "Read them." She scanned the first page. "Non-disparagement agreement. Are you serious?" Entirely. You sign, I erase any trace of your involvement from the investor communications. That keeps your name out of official records. And if I don't sign, I smiled, then you remain the reason his projects fell apart. Your choice. Her hand shook as she signed. When she finished, I slipped the papers into my bag. I hope you feel better, she said bitterly. I do, I said. Progress is healing. She turned toward the door, but before she reached it, she paused. You really hate him, don't you? I thought for a moment. No. Hate implies effort. I just don't think about him anymore. She opened her mouth to reply, then froze. The garage door had begun to lower slowly behind her. The automated system clicked, sealing her inside. Her eyes went wide. What's happening? Alarm test, I said calmly. Don't worry, it's on a timer. You'll be out in 30 seconds. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathing fast. That's not funny. I didn't tell a joke. The door finished its descent with a mechanical sigh. 30 seconds later, it rose again, smooth and deliberate. Amanda bolted out as soon as the gap appeared, muttering something I didn't catch. When her car engine started, it sounded uneven, as if even the machine was second-guessing her. I waited until the headlights disappeared, then walked back inside. The air smelled of vanilla and satisfaction. On the counter, my phone buzzed with a message from Victor. Variant report available for review. Call when ready. Variant report. The phrase tugged at something faintly familiar. I opened the attached file. The first line made me smile. Clause sample matches decoy phrasing inserted 2015, client identifier, LB, Lydia Brooks. Of course, Richard hadn't done this alone. Lydia had copied one of my old contracts, the prototype trust I'd written years ago, and used it to create their own version. She'd even left in the decoy language I'd planted to trace unauthorized use. I had forgotten all about that trick, but apparently the universe hadn't. I scrolled further. The variant clause rendered any document containing it void upon duplication. In plain English, every amendment Lydia had filed for Richard's benefit was worthless, and provably hers. Well, I murmured, isn't that poetic? I called Victor. Confirm the authenticity of this report. It's airtight, he said. Digital timestamp, notarized chain of custody. Anyone presenting those documents will expose themselves immediately. Perfect. Send certified copies to my office, and please mark the originals confidential. When I hung up, I realized I was smiling again. Wide, unforced, genuine. It wasn't joy exactly, more like balance finding its center. The next morning, Willow Bend woke to drizzle and rumors. Lydia had apparently attempted to file something at the courthouse regarding property division. By noon, word spread that the clerk rejected it for irregular language. By dinner, that language had become forged documents. By bedtime, it was federal investigation. I didn't correct anyone. Let the legend grow. It needed no help from me. Around 7, Claire texted, "Did you hear about Lydia's meltdown at the garden club?" I poured myself coffee and typed back, I'm sure it was horticulturally enlightening. At 8, Kira called to report that Richard's investors had scheduled an emergency meeting. "They're asking for you to attend as acting manager," she said. "I'll be there," I replied. "Bring the variant report." The meeting took place downtown in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the river. Richard arrived 10 minutes late, rain on his shoulders, defiance in every step. Lydia wasn't with him, probably hiding. The investors sat in a tidy semicircle, polite but chilly. Richard began without waiting. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "I still hold 51% of Brooks Development." I placed the report on the table. "Actually, you don't. That 51% was assigned to a holding trust when you signed the refinancing packet 4 years ago. Clause 12 transfers control upon conduct variance." One investor leaned forward. "And who defines conduct variance?" I slid a page toward him. "He does," I said. "He signed the definition himself." Murmurs rippled through the room. Richard's face paled as he scanned the page. That's not my signature. It is, I said. And even if it weren't, your sister's decoy amendments invalidate your claim altogether. He looked up sharply. What are you talking about? Ask Lydia, I said. She's better with creative editing. The investors exchanged knowing glances. One of them closed his folder. I think our decision is clear. And just like that, it was done. Outside, rain still fell in thin silver threads. I walked to my car without hurrying, the city lights smearing softly on the wet pavement. The steering wheel felt steady under my hands, the air cool against my face. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I was reacting to anything. I was simply steering. When I reached home, the alarm light blinked once in recognition. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Orderly. Mine. I hung my coat, poured a glass of wine, and stood by the window. Somewhere out there, Richard was realizing how complete the collapse was, how every door he'd opened led back to me. Amanda was probably packing. Lydia, plotting apologies disguised as explanations. And me, I was enjoying the quiet hum of victory that didn't need witnesses. I lifted the glass, watching the rain slide down the glass pane like slow handwriting. 48 hours, I whispered, and everything finds its owner. The clock on the counter ticked once, steady and precise. The lights reflected cleanly off the marble, and I thought, not for the first time, how satisfying justice looks when it's perfectly proportioned. By dawn, the storm had cleared, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and possibility. I was at my desk before sunrise, coffee cooling beside a stack of documents. The city outside the window gleamed faintly gold, fresh and guiltless. Paperwork has that same innocence until you read the fine print. The courier arrived at 8 sharp with the certified variant report. I signed for it, slit the envelope, and skimmed the top page. Every sentence was an echo of my foresight. Each clause, a breadcrumb, back to Lydia's impatient greed. The watermark, my initials in miniature. When I planted those decoys years ago, I'd been half amused, half bored. Now, they were a masterpiece of self-defense. Kira peeked in with a pastry box and curiosity. So what's next? You've frozen the accounts, taken the cars, outmaneuvered the sister, terrified the girlfriend. What's left? Closure, I said. And presentation. She nodded, setting the pastries down. You mean the investor meeting tomorrow? I mean the open house, I corrected. Richard's planning to stage one for a visiting investor. We'll make it memorable. Her eyebrows rose. You're going to show up? I'm going to host, I said. It's my house. When she left, I opened my calendar and typed, Open house protocol, noon Saturday. Then I sent a brief message to the alarm company. Prepare for demonstration mode. Include visual effects, no audible alerts. They replied within minutes. Confirmed. I leaned back and smiled. Revenge, properly executed, requires as much choreography as compassion. The rest of the day unfolded quietly. I signed a few minor closings, returned calls, and drafted a letter to the board confirming my new title. Around 3, Claire stopped by my office, pretending to drop off a brochure, which meant she wanted gossip firsthand. So, she said, leaning on the doorframe, I heard Lydia tried to confront you at the garden club yesterday. Ended with her pouring coffee down her own sleeve. Accidents happen, I said, especially when hands shake. Claire grinned. You've become legend. Everyone keeps saying they didn't really know you. That's the secret, I said. They didn't. By evening, the final preparations were complete. I sent one last email to Victor, confirming that the title bulletin would publish at precisely 12:15 p.m. the next day, right in the middle of Richard's presentation. The ownership of record would update in every database simultaneously. Neat, public, irreversible. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked through the room slowly. The silence felt almost theatrical. I paused in the kitchen, where it had all started, and looked at the reflection of the pendant lights in the polished countertop. Every inch of the space was orderly again, as if chaos had been a temporary guest. My phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. "Tomorrow we talk, in front of everyone. You'll regret humiliating me." I stared at it for a moment, then replied with one word. "Tomorrow." Sleep came easily that night, deep and untroubled. Saturday morning, Willow Bend looked like a commercial for domestic perfection. Freshly cut lawns, neighbors pretending not to stare. I wore a dark green dress, understated but precise, the kind of dress people remembered without knowing why. The open house began at noon. By the time I arrived, the driveway was lined with cars, and chatter spilled from the front door. Realtors, potential buyers, investors, all sipping espresso, admiring crown molding, pretending to love conversation. Richard stood near the fireplace, smiling with the confidence of a man convinced he was about to reclaim his throne. Amanda hovered beside him, her smile glued on like wallpaper. I stepped through the door. Conversations faltered. Richard's expression froze. "Eleanor," he said smoothly, "so glad you could join us." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. "After all, it's a lovely property." He gestured toward the investor standing nearby. "This is Mr. Gaines. We were just discussing expansion opportunities." Mr. Gaines shook my hand politely. "Pleasure. Beautiful home." "Thank you," I said. "It's mine." Richard laughed lightly, the way people do when they suspect the joke isn't one. "Still sharp as ever." "Sharper," I said, "and more documented." The crowd tittered uncertainly. I stepped forward, setting my bag on the table. "If you'll all check your phones, there's been an update." A murmur swept through the room as notifications chimed. Mr. Gaines frowned at his screen. "Property ownership change? Effective today?" Richard's color drained. "What is this?" "Public record," I said. "Filed 2 weeks ago, scheduled for release at 12:15. Right on time." "You can't," he began, but I raised a hand. "I can, and I did. Every asset under Brooks Development reverts to my trust as of this morning. That includes this house, the cars, and the development rights you've been using as collateral." Amanda stepped back, eyes wide. "Richard." "Quiet," he snapped. The investors were already whispering to each other, eyes darting between us. Lydia appeared at the doorway then, breathless, holding a folder. "Don't listen to her," she shouted. "These documents, these show it's fraud." She waved the papers like a flag. I almost admired the commitment. I gestured to Mr. Gaines. "Would you mind reading the first line of the second page?" He took the folder, adjusted his glasses, and read aloud. "Clause 21. This agreement shall supersede any prior arrangement unless otherwise voided by decoy phrase." He stopped mid-sentence, realization dawning. "Decoy phrase?" I nodded. "Those papers contain an identifier I created years ago. Any document with that phrasing invalidates itself and marks its author as the copier. In this case, your author is Lydia Brooks." Lydia's hand trembled. "You set me up." "I warned you once to stay out of my business," I said. "You didn't listen." Richard's voice rose. "You're destroying everything." "Correction," I said calmly. "I'm reclaiming what was always mine." He lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers, but Mr. Gaines stepped between us. "That's enough, Richard. This is over." The room buzzed with conversation, some sympathetic murmurs toward me, others simply thrilled by the spectacle. Outside, I heard the faint rumble of a tow truck approaching. The final cue. Right on schedule. Amanda backed toward the door, whispering something to Lydia, who looked ready to collapse. Richard turned on me, fury simmering. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said. "It makes me precise." At that exact moment, the house lights shifted, the alarm system entering demonstration mode. Soft pulses of white light glowed along the ceiling edges, washing the room in alternating brightness. The guests gasped, doors clicked shut automatically, the system syncing to show control. No alarms blared, no chaos, just quiet authority. Richard looked around wildly. "What's happening?" "Security feature," I said, sipping from a glass of sparkling water. "It recognizes the owner. It's saying hello." He tried to open the front door. It didn't budge. Panic flashed across his face. "Turn it off." I met his gaze evenly. "It will when the demonstration ends. About 2 minutes." The investors exchanged looks, some amused, others impressed. Amanda pressed herself against the wall, muttering that she wanted to leave. Lydia fanned herself with a brochure. The lights pulsed one last time, then returned to normal. The front door clicked open, quiet and polite. Mr. Gaines cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brooks, I believe our meeting is concluded. You'll hear from our office regarding the new arrangements." "Of course," I said. He turned to Richard. "Good luck," he added curtly, and walked out. Within minutes, the crowd dispersed. Lydia stumbled after them, still muttering. Amanda slipped out silently, head down. Only Richard remained, standing amid the echo of voices. He looked smaller than I remembered. "Was this worth it?" he asked softly. "Making a scene?" I gathered my bag, straightened my jacket. Scenes end, records remain. He shook his head. "You'll be alone forever." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll be free. There's a difference." I walked past him, heels steady on the polished floor, and stepped out onto the porch. The tow truck was waiting at the curb, Hook already sliding under his SUV. The driver nodded to me. I nodded back. The machine hummed, lifting the vehicle gracefully off the ground. Richard appeared behind the glass door, shouting something I couldn't hear. The door sealed again automatically, leaving him framed in silence. The afternoon light spilled across the lawn, bright and ordinary. I walked down the steps, the faint scent of jasmine drifting from the neighbor's hedge. In my car, on the passenger seat, the envelope for my new seaside property waited, signed, notarized, ready. I started the engine. In the rearview mirror, the mansion shimmered behind me, perfect and hollow. For the first time, I felt the absence of weight. No anger, no lingering what-ifs, just the clean satisfaction of completion. As I pulled away, the tow truck followed, carrying the last symbol of his empire behind it like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. And that was where the story ended. On movement, not reflection. On motion, not mercy. The kind of ending that doesn't fade, only continues in silence, exactly as planned. The day after the open house, the news spread through Willow Bend like a breeze that carried equal parts admiration and fear. By sunrise, I was already the neighborhood myth. Mrs. Brooks, calm, sharp, smiling, while she dismantled her husband's empire in broad daylight. Housewives whispered my name like a spell. Men avoided eye contact. It was the best kind of quiet fame. Earned, undeniable, and slightly terrifying. I didn't leave the house that morning. I didn't have to. Everything was already in motion. The alarm system gave a soft chime as I poured coffee. "Welcome home, Eleanor," the automated voice said. That line, programmed years ago for convenience, now sounded like applause. I took my mug to the kitchen window. Across the street, Mrs. Haskins pretended to prune roses while staring directly at my driveway. When I waved, she almost dropped her shears. I smiled and turned away. By 10, my phone buzzed non-stop. Claire called first. "Eleanor, the open house. People are saying it was like a movie. Lydia's face, Richard shouting, the lights." "Let them say what they want," I interrupted. "You really don't care." "I care about results. Everything else is just commentary." Claire laughed softly. "You're terrifying." "I prefer effective," I said. When I hung up, another call came through. Victor from the bank. "Mrs. Brooks, all accounts are stable under your authority. Mr. Brooks attempted a transfer this morning. It was denied automatically. I thought you'd want to know. I do, I said. Thank you, Victor. Continue monitoring for any attempts. Of course. And congratulations, ma'am. Most people plan defenses. You built an entire fortress. After the call, I leaned against the counter, letting the weight of it all settle. Not grief, not relief, just equilibrium. I'd spent years building quietly, disguised as cooperation. Now, finally, everything was visible. By noon, an email arrived from the investors. They wanted to retain me as managing counsel and majority shareholder. I typed a polite acceptance, added a small clause ensuring full discretion over future development, and sent it without ceremony. No champagne, no applause, just paperwork, the truest ending to every story of power. But the universe wasn't done testing the hinges. At 2, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Richard standing there, raincoat over yesterday's suit, eyes sleepless. He looked smaller somehow, like the air had drained out of him. Behind him, the sky was heavy with the promise of another storm. "Can we talk?" he asked. I considered him for a long moment before stepping aside. 5 minutes. He walked in slowly, glancing around as though expecting the furniture to attack him. His voice, when it came, was softer than I remembered. "You won, Eleanor." "It wasn't a contest," I said. "It was accounting." He gave a bitter laugh. "You always had the last word." "Not always," I said. "But the important ones, yes." He moved toward the kitchen table, the same table where he once left morning notes written on napkins, the same place where his lies had probably begun. He brushed a finger over the polished surface. "You planned this? Every step?" "Not every step," I said, "just the necessary ones." He looked up sharply. "You humiliated me." "No," I corrected. "You exposed yourself. I simply stopped covering for you." He sighed, sinking into a chair. "I don't even recognize you anymore." "That's because you never really looked." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of a sprinkler outside. He stared at his hands for a long time, then said quietly, "Amanda left." "Did she?" "She said she couldn't handle the chaos. She said I'm toxic." "How observant," I said. His eyes flicked up. "You enjoy this?" "No," I said. "Enjoyment implies surprise. I expected this outcome." He stood abruptly, frustration flickering back into his posture. "I came here to ask for one thing." "Money?" "No, mercy." That caught me off guard, not because I felt any, but because I didn't think he'd say it out loud. I studied him. Mercy isn't a currency I trade in. He took a slow step closer. "You think this makes you powerful, but it just proves you're alone." I smiled faintly. "You mistake solitude for weakness. They're not the same." For a moment he looked as though he might argue, but then his shoulders dropped. "You always win," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "I just don't quit halfway." He nodded once, defeated, then turned to leave. When he reached the door, I said, "Richard." He paused, half-turned. "Don't come back," I said. "You're trespassing now." He blinked, realizing the truth of it. Every deed, every title, my signature alone. Even the alarm system knew his absence. He stepped outside without another word. I watched from the doorway as he walked down the street, his figure shrinking under the thickening clouds until he disappeared around the corner. That evening, Willow Bend shimmered under streetlights, the air heavy with gossip. Through the window, I saw shadows move behind curtains, neighbors whispering, comparing theories. The woman who lost her husband and somehow ended up richer, freer, and unbothered. They couldn't decide whether to fear or admire me. I didn't mind either way. I lit a candle on the counter and poured myself another glass of wine. The house hummed around me, doors breathing quietly, the soft click of the thermostat, the distant buzz of life returning to rhythm. My phone vibrated with a message from Victor. "Transfer complete. All assets now listed solely under your trust." Congratulations again, Mrs. Brooks. I typed back, "Thank you, Victor. That will be all." Then I deleted every old photo. Wedding, vacations, holiday dinners. Each deletion was a small, efficient erasure, leaving behind nothing sentimental, nothing unfinished. When I finally looked up, my reflection in the glass surprised me. Not softer, not colder, just clear. A woman who had built her own ending with clean hands and sharper paperwork. Outside, thunder rolled softly. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm chirped once, then fell silent. I raised my glass to the window, to my reflection, to the silence I'd earned. To closure, I said, and that was it. The last word, the last movement. No redemption, no forgiveness. Just conclusion, steady and undeniable, wrapped in the hum of a perfect suburban evening.